So, Andrew, you founded your company in 1986.
Yep.
You've been very successful. What does a gaming consultant do?
Well, what I do is I help companies understand markets, how to access those markets, and sometimes manage the process into those markets.
How'd you get started?
I took a gap year between college and university, and I got a job in a casino.
So you're dealing the cards.
I was dealing the cards, roulette, craps, and then I went to university, studied biochemistry, and I decided after a while that biochemistry was not what I wanted to spend my life doing. So I was working part-time in the casinos to make money during my studies, and I decided to stay in it. And then Atlantic City was opening up, so I went across and worked in Atlantic City, was there for about 4 years, and then I went back to the UK, managed some casinos in the UK at a very young age, and I just decided I wanted a bit more than working for a company. I wanted to work for myself, so I started consulting.
So what trends are you seeing right now in this industry?
So what we're seeing is, obviously there's been a massive expansion in online gambling, and that hasn't hurt the land-based casinos. At first people were very worried that online gambling was basically going to eat land-based casinos' lunch.
So we're not seeing that?
Not seeing that at all. No. There is some crossover, but actually what you're seeing is it's generating new customers, and people will go to casinos because they've actually played online and they want to go and try playing in land-based casinos.
Right, because there's been this kind of concern that you have these millennials and these like GenZ-ers who are used to doing everything on their phone, right? Everybody's used to doing everything digitally. Are we going to be able to get that generation into a building, into brick and mortar?
So you've got to think about who's gambling currently and who used to gamble. It was never young people. Vegas was not built on young people. Vegas was built on middle-aged and elderly people coming to gamble. That's what it was about. And casino gambling's always been that way. So the expectation to get the 20-somethings to come to casinos to gamble, I think is a bit of a myth. The difference today is, if you look at the level of debt that generation has, it's higher than 20, 30, 40 years ago. They've got college loans, they've got credit cards, they're not earning, they don't own properties, they're paying rent. So they don't really have enough spare cash to save money, to be able to buy properties and to do things like go to casinos.
So are you saying then that we will see a shift where we will see sort of this dry spell?
I think that economically, and this is not just in the United States, I think it's in Europe too, is that you're going to see a whole generation with less disposable income. And as a consequence of that, they will not be going to the casinos quite as much. They will not be playing quite as much as they did in the past.
So what do you think will take the place of that? Will anything take the place of that?
I just don't think they have the cash. The other thing you've got to remember is there's been a massive expansion in other spending opportunities. I mean, think about food, right? 30 years ago, how many restaurants were there? Today, how many restaurants are there? You're competing for people's time. That's what we're doing, is we are competing, we're all out there. It's one form of entertainment or another, whether it's eating, going to the movies, streaming videos, going to casinos, at the racetrack, whatever it might be. It's a slice of people's time and it's a slice of people's wallet. So that's contracting. That's expanding. The opportunities for that are expanding. So casinos are having to compete for people's time. And that wasn't the case 30 years ago.
So as a consultant, if I'm a casino owner, how would you consult me knowing the information that you have right now?
Well, you've got to look at, okay, what is the market I'm in? What are my strengths? Who are my competitors? Where are they going? Where do I want to be in 5 years' time? Where is the sweet spot? What can I do with my particular strengths? Where am I going to be in that five years' time? And what's the path I need to take to get there?
So I read that you do a lot of these gambling market surveys. What kind of questions are you asking and what have you found in those?
Okay, so what we try and look at is, when you go into new markets, there's nothing to compare. Okay, so many years ago, I was approached to see if I could help finance a project for a Native American casino. And I went to Wall Street this Native American tribe was looking for about $50 million. And Wall Street, all they could say to me was, well, will people go to gamble? Well, why would they go there to gamble? Because they had nothing to compare it to. And the consequence was they raised their money elsewhere, and today it's called Foxwoods. It was one of the largest casinos in the world. Because Wall Street tries to look at comparators and says, okay, if they're doing that here, we can look at this and say, well, it's likely they're going to be doing that here too. So what we're trying to do is, when you're trying to look at integrated resorts in Europe, there aren't any. So how do you say, how are Europeans going to behave? Will they go to integrated resorts? And, you know, a lot of what we hear is Europeans don't gamble. They do, they just gamble on different things. We have higher spending on lotteries and lower spending in casinos. Will integrated resorts appeal to them? So what we try and do is we try and ask questions that get those kind of answers, and we don't use the word casino because casino is very emotive. And what casino is, a European's idea of a casino and an American's idea of a casino is completely different. Europe, it's kind of a small, pokey, smoky, well, it used to be smoky, kind of place that you didn't really want to go to, and you probably wouldn't take your wife to that often. But, you know, would you go? So it's showing people pictures and saying, what is important to you? Would you go there? And so on. So what are the findings are, they love it. I was in one set of focus groups. If I could have sold tickets at that focus group, they would have, every single one of them just loved the idea. They thought it was absolutely fabulous.
One thing we're also seeing right now is we're seeing this sort of like secondary, secondary market come about when we were speaking of lotteries, where people are now betting on the lottery. They're not just betting, they're betting on the bet.
Sure. So that, yeah, I mean, so if you can't offer a lottery, because they all tend to be state run, it's something that most states and countries hold to themselves and say, we're going to operate this and we're going to keep the lion's share of the revenue. So entrepreneurial companies have stepped up and said, well, wait a minute, we'll offer betting on the outcome of a lottery. And so either they charge you $2 for a $1 ticket and they get an agent to buy it, or they back it with insurance. And if your numbers come up, you win, and you win the prize. And there are plenty of them out there. And there's been court battles all over the world about whether or not this is legal. And Australia recently, it was found to be legal. So there's not very much they can do about it there.
All right, so what is the future of the gaming industry?
Well, I think one of the things we've got to be very concerned about, and if you're looking at what's happening in Europe today, what's happening in Europe today is there's a backlash against the gambling. We've seen, for example, UK Gambling Commission has taken action against companies. They're becoming much more restrictive and saying, okay, we're thinking about banning advertising. We are trying to restrict people's access to these products. Germany, they've taken slot machines out of or taking many of the slot machines out of the marketplace because there was unrestricted growth. The same we're seeing in Latvia, Estonia. Italy, ban on advertising. That's being contemplated in the UK, contemplated in Spain. So why is this happening? Well, if you look at the history of gambling, gambling used to be location specific. It used to be, we can control access if it's in a particular location. So Nevada, it was only here, then it was Atlantic City, then it was Deadwood, South Dakota, then it was 3 mining towns in Colorado, and then it went to, I think it was Missouri and Mississippi and so on. But it was always, oh, well, there are going to be riverboats, so we can control how many and where they're going to be. Online gambling is completely different. Anywhere there's a phone, there's gambling.
Yep.
And what's happened in Europe is these companies have been pushing the envelope in terms of advertising, especially television advertising, and people don't like it. They don't like to see gambling in their face. And I call it in-your-face gambling. They don't like to see it. And that was the problem with slot machines everywhere, FOBTs, fixed odds betting terminals in the UK. Those got basically £100 maximum bet, now have been pushed down to £2 maximum bet. Whether that does any good or not, I don't know. But it means that they are less profitable than they were. And when your kids come home and they can sing the jingle to a betting company, that's not a good thing. And in many people's eyes, that's not a good thing. So what happens is there is a group who are opposed to gambling. It's usually about 30% of the population are opposed to gambling. There's a smaller subset who are very vocally opposed to gambling. Then there are people who are sort of okay with gambling, and there are people who like it. It's very hard to get the latter two groups to come out and say, no, we want gambling, we absolutely want it. But the other group use emotion. It's not rational, it's emotion. They use emotional stories to try and close it down, to get it restricted. And politicians latch onto that, and it's something they can get onto, and the media loves it because they love these stories that they can push out there. And let's face it, they're not just stories, they're real people's lives. So that has an impact. And what I think the danger here in the US is with sports betting. Everybody's going, wow, this is great. Look, we can expand this sports betting state by state. It's going to be wonderful, brave new world. Careful, because you don't want to find yourself in the position we found ourselves in Europe. And what happens is it splashes back onto the other sectors. So it splashes back onto the land-based sector because they don't care that it's online. They care that it's gambling. So they'll come against online, then they'll come against land-based. And that's what you've got to be careful about. So the industry, my view is if I was an operator saying, I'm going to go into online gambling, I would get the industry together, agree a code of practice. You're not going to advertise stuff before 9:00 at night. You're not going to have stuff advertised around games. So you don't want Sunday afternoon football matches to become all about betting. And, because that's where it will go. And you will turn on your television, every break in a football match, American football match, will be a gambling advert. I can guarantee it if you don't do anything about it. And that is going to attract negative, it's going to fire up people to come against you.
Great words of wisdom. Andrew Tottenham, thank you.
Thank you.